Poštovani gledalci Radio-televizije Republike Srpske, dobro večer. Vilijam Montgomeri, bivši američki ambasador u Srbiji i Hrvatskoj, savjetnik State Departmenta u Bosni i Hercegovini, jedan od velikih poznavalaca prilika na Balkanu, govori za Radio-televizije Republike Srpske uoči 30. godišnjice Dejtonskog mirovnog sporazuma. Komentarisat ćemo aktualnu političku krizu u BiH, ulogu i budućnost OHR-a, kao i velike promjene u politici Sjedinjenih Američkih Država prema ovom regionu. Mr. Montgomeri, dobro večer and welcome.
Hvala. Čast mi je da budem s vami danas i da budem u Banjoj Luci.
I nama je čast da vas ugostimo. We will switch to English from now on. So, as we approach the 30th anniversary of Dayton Agreement, how do you assess the political reality in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
I'm sorry to say, but I think we're all sort of stuck in the past. That the Dayton Agreement was a good thing when it was done, if you look at it as a truce agreement, because it brought an end to the fighting and allowed freedom of movement to start again, and did some very good things at the beginning. But I don't think it was ever really intended to be sort of like a permanent document, a permanent Bible, if you will, of how to behave. And so I think it's a long time for us to lead to changes. And the problem is that I started to say this 10, 15 years ago. At first nobody listened, and then everybody sort of agrees. It's hard to find anybody who doesn't say, yeah, we should make some changes, but it's very difficult to make any changes whatsoever because the three ethnic groups can never really agree on any changes. And so something has to be done because the Dayton Agreement is out of date, and I think it's gone from helping Bosnia for peace and stability to being an impediment to it.
Well, you were the one that used to say that from the beginning of the Dayton Agreement, Bosnia should have been constituted from three,
yes,
rather than two entities.
Yes.
Would that be a better starting point from the get-go?
I think for sure it would. I think that even though the Croat numbers are less, I think they did deserve to have their own entity, and would have created, I think, a better basis for having true negotiations than you have with the situation now. So I'm sorry that that was not done. I understand it would have been complicated, it would have been hard, but I think it'd be important. And as you know, if you are a Croat living in Bosnia and somebody asks, where are you from? They say Herzegovina. They don't say Bosnia. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show that they needed to have that step, I think, to be on an equal footing with the other two ethnic groups.
Yet, when we talk today about Dayton Peace Agreement, politicians from Sarajevo tend to go towards the centralization of Bosnia.
Yes.
Serbs like to keep their autonomy. Croats have problems with their representation in Bosnia and the cantons as well.
Yes.
So do you think is it possible or is it dangerous to talk about reconfiguration of the Dayton Bosnia?
It's both.
Yeah.
Because I think it's necessary as possible, but it also has its dangers. Because any changes that are made are going to be viewed by at least one ethnic party as something against them. So it's very difficult to do, and I think can only be done with the strong support of the international community. It can't be done just locally. It's got to have that strong international support. So I'm hoping that that can come, but the reality is that in today's world, with the problems that we're facing elsewhere, the West actually is rather neglecting Bosnia. It's not one of the major issues on the table, which in a way is a good thing. It's not because there's no violence, but it also means that without the attention, it'll be very difficult to make changes. So you're in a real dilemma.
Yes, and how do you see the functionality of Bosnia and Herzegovina today, given the fact that the OHR is still present here, given the fact that we have foreign judges in the Constitutional Court, which were all meant to be temporary measures?
Well, one thing that I'm not sure about, I view the Dayton Accord as something that was a sort of truce agreement that would lead then to an evolution to a different way of doing things. But instead, it's being treated like a hard and fast document that no changes can be made. And I think that's unfortunate. And when you look, 30 years, for 30 years, I think probably half of your population wasn't even born until after Dayton was signed. And yet there's a high representative here, which means that you don't really have your own country in the way that most people think of it. You have this person there. And I think this whole thing needs to be looked at very carefully. But of course, the key is this has to be done with the full support and knowledge of the international community to ensure that it doesn't lead to violence, because it could well do so. It's a very, very difficult issue.
Well, there's an interesting development globally, especially with the approach of the new U.S. administration. The President Trump himself said that their foreign policy, especially regarding Western Balkans, is not to interfere so much in the politics, to let the local political leaders find solutions themselves. But yet we have an ongoing crisis. They say that it is probably the most serious crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina since Dayton, and in part it was triggered by Christian Schmidt and his imposed decisions, especially his meddling and imposing laws, even though laws by Dayton and the constitutions should be only brought by Parliament. Yeah. But he imposed laws which consequently brought to this crisis. So how do you see that, especially given that he lacks UN Security Council resolution?
Well, I remember, I won't say his name, but I remember a former High Representative who got into some public conflicts with President Dodik. And he got a call from the European Union. It said, we notice these conflicts, and we just want to tell you very clearly, you're totally on your own. If you go ahead with this, you're not going to have any Western support. I don't know if the current High Representative got that sort of message or not. The problem is that on paper, the High Representative has a lot of power. This was derived, first of all, from the initial Dayton Accord, but then by the addition of the bond powers, which, again, on paper, gives him a lot of authority. But the challenge is in trying to exert that authority in today's world, and it's not really possible. And so that, again, is why this whole system needs to be looked at. And I know very well we have to have the involvement of the international community to do that, because if one entity or one group of people tried to do something, it would lead to serious consequences.
Yes, but as you said, Bosnia has problems with its own sovereignty.
Yes.
And now we have those imposed decisions. In your opinion, have they damaged rather than helped Bosnia and Herzegovina in its political development?
Well, of course, they've hurt. They've made it more difficult. But I would also add that it would be frustrating to be trying to do anything in Bosnia when the three ethnic groups so often block any resolution for change. So it's a very frustrating situation for everybody.
Let's talk about legal proceedings against Milorad Dodik. It appears that the final outcome would be his removal from political scene. Would you consider that to be a political process?
I think, as I understand it, he may give up his position as president, but he's still going to be president of his party. So he will still be playing an active role. And I think it was a brave and wise thing he did to make this change. And I think he still is going to be a powerful figure in Republic of Srpska.
The relationship between Republic of Srpska and the United States has always been burdened. It was a difficult one.
Yes.
Not really friendly from our perspective for many years, although Serbs and Americans have been on the same page of same side of history.
Yes.
Through we
wars.
can say, yeah,
Yes.
through decades, even
Yes.
centuries. But now we see a change in that perspective. We see the lifting of the sanctions against
Yes.
Mr. Dodik, against many officials, many companies. So what, in your opinion, led to this? Is it our activity? Is it the change of perspective from Washington? What could it be?
I had great hopes when President Trump was elected, and I saw that he was moving very boldly around the world with various initiatives, and he didn't mind, we say, breaking eggs. He didn't mind doing things that others refused to do. And let me give you a very short example. For about 30 years, we have had in the State Department an office designed to encourage other NATO countries to give the share that was agreed on of 2% of their budget for defense. For 30 years, we've been trying to do this. And Trump came in and basically said, if you don't do it, don't look to us for support. And within about a month or less, all countries, except one, had raised their level from 2% to 5%. And that's the sort of strength and initiative and boldness that I hope he will use for this region as well. I don't know that he will. I have no idea. I think the lifting of the sanctions was a good first step, a needed first step.
How close are we to the focus or the attention of Washington now? I believe we are not so important as a region now, but is Washington sort of looking at us with a partially or with some attention? Even are we left alone, or well, because we know what's happening in Russia, we know what's happening in the Middle East. Those are the focal points now.
The big issues, yes.
Yeah.
There's an interesting chart that shows American ambassadors around the world. And if you look at that chart, right now, there are 60 countries where there are no ambassadors and none named.
Including Bosnia and Serbia?
Including Bosnia and Serbia. And this is really bad because it takes an ambassador and a strong ambassador to help get attention and make change. And when you don't have that, it's harder to get the attention that the region deserves. So I hope they will name some talented people very quickly to those positions. But the reality is that from the time you name somebody, they have to go through the confirmation process, and it will be a couple more months. So I don't expect you'll see an ambassador here this year.
Until New Year?
No.
So what happens then? We do have interest shown by European countries such as Germany in the first place, or France, or Great Britain. They still look at this area as their area of interest. So do you risk losing that touch?
I sort of welcome the attention of Western Europe. I don't see that it's a competition. I think there's room for everybody. And I do hope that we name an ambassador here because it really, in the case of Bosnia in particular, it takes a strong ambassador, I think, to make the case in Washington why change is needed and what needs to be done. And when you don't have that happening, you have sort of neglect. And that's, I think, what you're seeing now. You're seeing neglect. And unfortunately, it leaves Bosnia as sort of a second-class state with a high representative. It's sort of something that needs to be changed, but it will again take a lot of support to make that happen.
Do you feel that also the local politicians' attitude towards foreign ambassadors should change? Because sometimes we feel that some politicians tend to wait and ask for the advice from US, British, German ambassador in order to make some political arrangements here. Should that change?
Well, as a former ambassador 3 times, I knew the absolute importance of personal relationships, that there were governments that came and went, but if you had personal contact with ministers or other people, change was a lot easier, not even because of pressure, but just because you developed this relationship and you knew what they wanted. And that's what's so important here. We have a huge problem, I think, with Bosnia in the sense that in the United States we have a multicultural society that we value very, very highly. And I think we've tried to impose that around the world, whether it's with the Dayton Accords or the agreement over Kosovo, to make them sort of into replicas of our multicultural world. And I think what we have not learned sufficiently is in this region the importance, first, of ethnicity, and second, the respect for the past. In the United States, we care about the future and obviously about the present somewhat, and we don't care so much about the past. But in this region, the past has a lot more significance, a lot more importance, for very good reasons. I mean, if you look at your past 100 years, you've gone through a lot here. And it's what you remember. And we don't take that into sufficient consideration, in my view, in dealing with your problems. And just one small example. I don't know to this day, really, where my ancestors came from. Because in the United States, we really didn't care about that. So I do not know. Whereas here, we respect the past and honor it, and honor every year those who came before us. And I think it's a great tradition and one we don't have in the States.
Yes, we cherish that history, and we also believe that as a nation, as people, we sacrificed a lot, even for the Western freedom, and that is sometimes what hurts us as people, for the Americans or the Westerners not to acknowledge that and recognize that. Is there anything that you would have done differently now from those times when you were the ambassador or when you were advisor to the State Department in Bosnia?
Well, I really would be arrogant who said, if I were to say that, oh no, I wouldn't change anything. But I think that in my power, I did the best I could to help reconciliation. And I spent a lot of time here in Bosnia on the return of refugees. I spent a lot of time working with your president and others to help reconciliation and travel. I was involved in helping make the decision to change license plates, for example. Mm-hmm. That's when the war started, as you know, it identified where you were from by your license plate, which said the city. And we got that changed. It was the High Representative, but I helped to make it impossible to know. And I think it was a small change, but it was changes like that that helped make travel easier, etc.
Some say that it was one of the decisions that actually made sense in everyday life. Yeah. Because we can now move freely. Yeah. There's no danger of somebody attacking one another because of where they come from, etc. So that is maybe one small thing. Yeah.
Well, but I think it hasn't worked out exactly as we hoped, but the decision to give everybody back the title of the house they had in, I think it was 1990, was a good step, even though it hasn't worked out exactly as we hoped, because a lot of those places were very quickly sold to somebody else. But it was a start. So I am more optimistic than perhaps you in that I come to Banja Luka and I see a pretty thriving city, a lot of healthy, happy people. So there's a lot more work to do, but I think a lot of progress has been made. So I'm an optimist in that regard.
Let's talk briefly about the global politics. Do you feel that there is a change in the geopolitical reshaping of the world? Do you believe that there will be a multipolar world with not only one superpower or interest group? And yeah. Is it, I know you are American, but is that a good way to continue?
Well, I was a diplomat at the height of the Cold War. And the United States, for a while, was virtually the only world superpower. NATO looked very much to us because of their fears about Russia, the Soviet Union, etc. So we were very, very powerful then. But the world has changed, and now it is very much more a multipolar world, for sure. And you have regional powers that are very, very important in their region, whether it's China, Japan, Brazil, whoever else. In their region, they have a lot of power. And I think this is a healthy thing. I don't think that the United States should be dominating the world and making decisions. I think it's healthy. I think also that we help to bring about this diminution of our strength by things like the Iraq War, the Afghan War, those endless wars that cost us support of allies around the world, cost us a lot of money. And I think that helped to shape our attitude as well, in that we became, if you will, slightly less interested in the world and more interested in the United States, which has also led to this reduction in American strength. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it makes the world situation far, far, far more complex.
And how do you see relationship between America and Russia? Will it get better, or is it in your interest, both countries, to have better relationships to solve the Ukrainian conflict and move forward?
Well, I think actually, if you look at economic strength, the key country is China. And China is the growing power economically and also militarily. So that's the country to watch. Russia has strength basically from its nuclear weapons. And it has a military that hasn't really performed very well in Ukraine. But as a result of Ukraine, I think we've strengthened our forces in the Baltics and other places. But I don't see Russia as our primary opponent. I think economically it's certainly China, and China is growing and growing and growing. I think the Russian economy is a third-rate economy, and it's not a threat. You don't see innovations coming from Russia or anything. Basically, Russia is a military issue more than anything else. So I look to China as the country that we have to figure out how to handle in a positive way. We have tried to do so for about 20 years to include them in the international trade system, et cetera, with the hopes of bringing them in. And it hasn't worked quite the way we wanted it to, and their power keeps growing. So that's where I would keep my eye on.
And at the end, let's talk about Republic of Srpska and Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you see the situation here developing in, let's say, 5 years from now? Can you see any improvement? Can you see any arrangements, political arrangement, or is there a danger of making problems even bigger?
I think, as I have said and shouted, the Dayton Accord isn't working. The international community has to get involved to make this a better system. Until it does so, there is always a danger of violence, from any side. But it's actually perhaps not the best situation in the world, but it's working, maybe less well than it should, but it is working. Your people are in much better shape now than they were before the whole Dayton Agreement. So it's working, and I think because it's working to some extent, the world attention has drifted away from it, which again, we're getting back to why having a strong ambassador here to try to get more attention. But it's going to be a challenge because you look at our situation with China, you look at our other issues, like Ukraine, et cetera, problems now in Venezuela, of all places. It's going to be hard to get the international attention that you deserve.
So a message to our politicians is to be more responsible and take responsibility?
Well, I think, honestly, I know it's very hard and it's very easy for a foreigner to say, but it would be wonderful to see if the three ethnic groups could find ways to better interact. That would be good for the whole country. But again, that would be easier if Croatia had its entity as well, because I think what's happening now, in the Federation is that the Croats are being excluded from a lot of the decision making and a lot of the authority, and that's unfortunate.
Mr. Montgomeri, thank you for your time and for visiting us.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledaoci, gost Radio-televizije Republike Srpske bio je Vilijam Montgomeri. Hvala vam za pažnju, ostanite uz naš program.